Okay, good. I'm deputizing for John Dougill this morning to introduce our speaker at this Writers in Kyoto event. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And our main speaker needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce her anyway. Dr. Jann Williams, and I'm going to ask her a couple of questions in order to introduce her talk. Jann, can you please tell about your experience with Writers in Kyoto? You have been the editor of the anthology #3, Encounters with Kyoto, and now you have been also dubbed the anthology supervisor, which means that you are going to be setting up the guidelines for any anthology that is published in the future. And as a past editor, I can attest that we're all very grateful to you for all your hard work with those things. Do you have anything to add about your association with Writers in Kyoto?
I'd just like to say I've been a member of Writers in Kyoto for 6 years now, and it really has made a sort of huge difference to my experience in Japan. And just, you know, the opportunity to meet so many creative writers and talented writers and be involved in various events. And yeah, and it's just been, it has made a difference, and it's probably sort of kept me going back to Japan and interacting with people, and kept my enthusiasm, helped do that. And as Rebecca said, I edited the third anthology because I have a lot of editing experience as an environmental scientist, but with a science audience rather than creative writers, so that was an interesting change. And so it's been a wonderful group to be involved with. So,
Okay, thank you. Can you enlarge on your experiences in the environmental field? I understand you got a rather prestigious award for your work in that. What did that involve?
Yes, I'll talk a bit more about my experience in sort of as an ecologist in my talk, but the award was the gold medal of the Ecological Society of Australia for my significant contribution to ecology over my career. And that was awarded in November 2019 in Tasmania. And it was the reason why I left Japan in mid-November was to come and prepare and give my presentation at the award, and I've never been back. Because of COVID, we went away for 6 weeks after that, and then I just haven't been back since then, so it's been quite a while. But yeah, my career has been quite diverse, but I was the president of the Ecological Society for 2 years, and co-founded the journal Ecological Management and Restoration, and was actively involved in conferences and have written a lot of papers which continue to be cited. So given all that sort of combined, and mentorship of students and things, given all that combined experience, the president and the committee decided was worthy of the award. So that was quite special.
Well, congratulations for that. And without further ado, we'll start you talking about your extensive library and anything else you'd like to talk about. So take it away, Jann. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for your introduction, and to Lisa for setting up the meeting and helping me work out sort of the sharing screens and that early this morning. It was very helpful. And thank you for people coming along today. And there are a few apologies. John Dougill and James Woodham are both in England and are asleep at the moment. And Tina Del Belagade was hoping to come, but she's also probably been drawn to sleep, I think. And Sarah Yama, but they'll be able to watch the recording later. So, and anyone else who hasn't had the opportunity to join. I'd like to especially thank my brother Rod and sister Ruth for joining the session. And yeah, Ruth has been a really strong supporter of my journey to and through Japan, and we spent a month together in Japan in April 2018, which has left some really indelible memory. So thank you, Ruth. And now my talk is the fourth in an ongoing series of WIC members talking about their libraries, because mine's a virtual talk, so you can't actually walk around. I can't pull out the books. I've prepared a presentation about the library and how the story of how it's developed over time. So there'll be an introduction and then some of the books that I'll feature in the presentation. So I'm going to change over to a PowerPoint presentation now. Share. And okay. How do I? Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to work out where the play button is. Excuse me a moment. We had this all worked out.
I think it's down at the bottom of your bottom right side of your PowerPoint thing. There's a couple of things.
Well, there was, but wait a minute. Sorry for this. We did have it all worked out, didn't we, Lisa? I'll just open it again. And go into share screen. It seems to be
you might try the little icon at the bottom right of your screen that looks like a tiny presentation screen, like a slideshow screen to the left. The icon to the left of the slider on the far right. On the far right, there's a slider, and then the one to the left of that. That one. Try that.
Bingo.
There we go. Well done. I'm screen sharing. So there's a view of some of my library. I've brought in some of the books behind me today, and I'm speaking from Tasmania in Australia. And I'm going to talk about my exploration of elemental Japan, and that encompasses seasons and natural forces and 5-element cosmologies, looking at well-being and the importance of vital energy in Japanese culture, and then bringing it together to try and discover lessons for a sustainable future. And I've used a very broad definition of library, so I'm including photos and books and people and music, but just a collection of materials for my reference and learning. And I share sort of what I've learned from these books through my blog, Elemental Japan, several publications that I'll talk about, and a forthcoming book, which is the reason for the venture. These are some of the characteristics which I sort of think lead me to being in this place at this point in time. So all my life I've been an avid reader. I find whatever I'm reading, that it just takes me to another place. It doesn't matter if it's a non-fiction or fiction. I just find I'm sort of, taken to another world. So I really enjoy that experience. And I have had a long-term passion for the natural world and art and literature and music, and sort of combining them all together. I really enjoy synthesizing a lot of information and pulling it together into a cohesive whole, and also being prepared to take a number of leaps of faith in my life, to often out of my comfort zone to sort of do what I'd like to do. And then writing has always been a big part of my life, and most recently photography as well. These are some of the sort of synthesis works, I guess I'd call them, that sort of give some examples of of what I've done as an ecologist and sort of pulling together a lot of information at a large scale. These all happened after my first trip to Japan in 1996, when I represented the Australian government at an International Tropical Timber Organisation meeting. Also went to a scientific meeting on forest management at the base of Mount Fuji, and that sort of initial seed sounded like it got planted then about a connection with Japan. In 1997, I'm very proud that, you know, published a book called Eucalypt Ecology, which I conceived and co-edited, and there was nothing, it was the first of its kind, and took, you know, worked with a lot of people and brought together a lot of expertise, and it's still considered to be a valuable reference. Sorry about that. Sensitive, I won't touch the mouse. The others are just the biodiversity chapter of the Australian State of the Environment Report, a book on fire regimes and biodiversity in Australia, which I was a co-editor, and then two reference manuals on native vegetation management. This one shown here is at a regional scale, the other at a property scale, which involved bringing together 1,000 references. So, you know, Australia-wide, many sources of information, bringing them together. And I think that ability is one of the reasons why the Ecological Society awarded me that prize as well. Bought my first book on Japan in 1989 and had no idea then that it would expand to over 1,200 physical books and thousands of digital ones, plus a comprehensive photo library and other things. Most of the books are non-fiction and in English, but I seek out translations and bilingual publications wherever I can. And most of the books have been acquired since 2016 and were augmented by extensive travel in Japan until COVID hit. So now I think because I've been, I'll stop touching that, apologies, because I've been in Tasmania for nearly 3 years now, I think that has attributed to me having a much bigger book collection than I might have had otherwise. I get the physical books from a number of sources, which you can see on the screen, and the digital sources are from one of the benefits of being an academic has been access to online libraries, which I've been able to make good use of. Also some books on Kindle, and then open access books, which I really support open access publishers, because it means that anyone can access them, which is a very good thing. In mid last year, I thought, well, I've got a lot of books in Japan, some of which are very important, and they're I wasn't sure when I'd be able to return to Japan, so I had my landlord send back all of my books, which took 5 boxes, which you can see here, and that's made it a lot easier to work, having access to all of them. Now, the framework I've been using to select which books to buy, because as you would all know, there's tens of thousands of books being written about Japan. People say, what else could you write? Well, that's a question, but and you know, even more academic publications. It's a subject of great interest. So I've been using the lens of the nature's elements to guide my selection of books and publications. About 10 years ago, I started looking at the elements as a way of connecting people and nature that is found across cultures all over the world. So there's something sort of innate about earth, air, fire and water that many people have seen fit to sort of take as a cultural guide. And then I decided it'd be good to focus on one area, and that turned out to be Japan, and turned out to be much bigger than I expected. So natural phenomena is a setting for the explorations. And, you know, as we all know, Japan has many earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis and so forth. It's a culture of the 4 seasons, as we know, So that's sort of the big setting. And then within that, I've been exploring 2 5-element correlative cosmologies, which are both found enmeshed in Japanese culture. One is its origin is esoteric Buddhism. So from India via China, that's the 5 great elements called Godai in Japanese, earth, water, fire, wind, and space. And the other 5 is a framework from China called Gogyo, or the 5 phases, and that's earth, water, fire, metal, and wood. And both of these sets of 5 elements have correlations with many other things like seasons and directions and Buddhas, depending on which one you're looking at. So, for example, this little item I bought from the Seimei Shrine in Kyoto has these 5 colours associated with it, which represent the 5 phases, Chinese phases. And five elements is a good sort of starting point. And if you search for 5 elements in Japan online, some sites will come up saying it's the Buddhist elements, and others will say that it's the Chinese elements. Very few say that it's both, but that it really is a matter of both being very enmeshed in Japanese culture. And it's interesting, though, we talk about 5 elements, but in Buddhism, there's also the 4 gross elements. And then in Shingon Buddhism, there's a 6th element called consciousness, which unifies the other 5. And without them, they do not sort of function or are not animated. So the 5 are the material elements, but in the case of Shingon Buddhism, the 6th is also required. I've been really interested in the symbolism associated with these elements. Symbols are very important in Japan, as we know, and so a fair bit of my time's been spent trying to find out more information about those. You'll all be familiar with the Gorinto, the 5-ring or 5-element tower. It's found all over Japan, principally in the cemeteries, so it's really, it's the most physical representation of a set of elements in Japan, that you can sort of the 5 parts of the structure represent earth, water, use the mouse, earth, water, fire, wind, and space, as you can see there. And the example I've got is from one of the temples on the Shikoku pilgrimage, which is strongly associated with the Gorinto as a form. You can see on the top left that this is a sign from Koya-san, where it's saying that Gorinto has been the religious symbol of that mountain site. The 5-tiered pagoda, the Gojinoto in the bottom left, is also associated with the 5-element symbolism. And the 5 phases in modern times are associated with the pentagram. And I've done a lot of research trying to trace that back in time, because there's in the last 30 years or so, a lot being written about the Abe no Seimei, who was a master of yin yang and onmyoji in the Heian period about 1,000 years ago. And today it is said that he borrowed the pentagram from Taoism, and it was associated with the 5 Chinese elements. And I've tried to trace that back, and the earliest example of the 5 Chinese elements phases associated with the pentagram is in the bottom right from 1759. So that's I'm still sort of working on that association, but for the moment the pentagram is a symbol for the 5 phases. Now I started taking photos all my books, and the idea was that not all of them, sorry, selections of them under different themes, and I thought I could go through those and talk about selected books. It's not going to happen, going to take too long. I was taking them from the front to show the covers, because as we know, the book cover is really important to attracting readers and giving an impression of what sort of the tone of the book's going to say. So this is the selection that I had chosen, but instead what I will do is talk about specific books within that, and maybe another day we can work through those images. This is just a quick copy of my digital library, which takes up much less space. You can see several thousand references on the iPad in the Books app, which has its uses. I mean, you can do searches for words within the individual articles, and by putting keywords in the names, you can find things quite easily. But I still like to have the physical book in front of me if I can. And on the right is just a part of my other library of mementos from Japan related to the elements. And here we have a poster library. I've also taken photos of many posters in Japan related to nature and the elements, to keep a record of how people see these. So when a book arrives, people might think, how do you manage so many publications? When each book arrives, I will skim through it quickly. I'm quite a quick reader, which is very helpful. And I particularly like illustrations or diagrams because they can tell you a lot. Look at those, put page markers in, just pieces of paper generally, to go back to certain places, take notes maybe at that time, and then in the digital version, then I put keywords, as I said, in the titles and things. They help me sort of think, oh, if I'm going to write about this particular topic, I can go to those particular publications, and that's when I'll look at it in more detail. But this was my most recent book that arrived on metabolism, which was an architectural movement after World War II, and sort of had a quick look through that. It's very interesting because it's a new architectural movement in response to the sort of the loss of buildings and things with the firebombing of Tokyo and bombing of other cities. So yeah, that's one of the things that interests me. Again, like the digital publication on poetry after the Fukushima disaster. This is an early example of responses to natural disasters. Sorry, mouse is very sensitive. I do have my blog. I've written about 40 blogs on the elements in Japan. It serves many purposes. It was to help sort of shape my ideas as I was sort of learning and traveling around Japan, and to share those with others, to get feedback, because, you know, it's sort of putting ideas out there for people to read and think about. 3 of those have been directly about Godai, the 5 Buddhist elements. More about Gogo because it's so enmeshed and pervasive in Japanese culture, even if it isn't conscious in many people's minds. So we have traditional Japanese medicine, the tea ceremony, gardening, and the Japanese equivalent of feng shui, which is very little written in English about, but it's very widespread and has been used for centuries. And then again, the one on the pentagram described. I've also written about, well, the Gorinto in the 4th anthology, Structures by Writers in Kyoto, Structures of Kyoto, and done an online magazine article with Maria Papatzalou, a Greek artist, photo artist. So it's something that, yeah, I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about and writing about. Still more to think and write about, and that's the name of my blog there. And I've met some wonderful people through writing the blog as well, so that's been a big benefit too. This is one of the, I was intending to write a blog on the Book of Five Rings. This was written in the 1640s by a very famous swordsman who had never lost a fight in his time. And it's well known in the West because it's been associated with management strategies. So this is one way the 5 Buddhist elements has become known in outside of Japan. And you can see here they've used, William Scott Wilson has used the Gorinto on his card. I need a different pointer. My apologies again. I won't stop using the pointer. When I looked further into the what's been written about the Book of Five Rings, I assumed it was associated with Shingon Buddhism and the 5 material elements. But then when I read Alexander Bennett's book, The Complete Musashi, he says that that wasn't the intention of Musashi, that he wasn't, I'll get the wording of it, he wasn't, says, as for the use of the 5 elements, it was not Musashi's intention to appropriate the idea from Buddhist philosophy. And he goes on to say why he thinks that is. Whereas William Scott Wilson in his afterward for the manga version on the far right says, directly links it to Shingon Buddhism, the Book of Five Rings. You could say that that's neither here nor there, but for me it's very important, and I'd like to sit down with Alexander and talk to him more about his thinking there. So I'm just going to step back a bit and go through a bit of a timeline in terms of how I've become so interested in the elements in Japan. In 2010, my husband and I went to a sustainability conference, also a pilgrimage to Koyasan, the spiritual home of the Gorinto, and that made a big impression. I used the book in the middle, went through, he writes down where all the main memorials are, so I wrote them all down to follow when we went there. And we also went to Tokyo, and I found this book, Just Enough, on the left by S.B. Brown, which had just been released, about lessons in living green from traditional Japan. And that really made an impact. And I think the book's time has come. It's been re-released by Stonebridge Press this year, I think. And yeah, it's getting a lot of attention. I was becoming more interested in what could be learnt from Japan, particularly in that Japan, the Shinto religion was animist, and that you know, the nature was seen as having a spiritual presence, you know, that there were spirits everywhere in nature. And so I was keen to learn more about Shinto and saw a one-week workshop in English advertised on Green Shinto, which John Dougill writes a blog, and that's how we came to meet each other. This was one of those leaps of faith I was talking about. I saw the workshop advertised, and then 2 weeks later was on a plane to Japan to attend this workshop. And I was met when I arrived at Utami Airport by Katsuya Kimura, and he's been my guide ever since for nearly 9 years now. He's sitting in that Shinto priest outfit in the photo there. I hadn't realised that I was following in the footsteps of Alex Kerr, a renowned Japanologist, and Catherine Pawasarat, who's written the first book in English on the Gion Festival. They both worked in Omoto's traditional arts program, which ran for about 20 years. And that was another of the attractions of Omoto. They promote traditional arts, and through my association with them, I've had the opportunity to go to the Seven Herbs of Spring Festival, No Theatre, poetry festivals and the like. It's also probably the first time that I started digging a bit deeper into some of the practices in Japan. So the books on the left, the one on Shingon Kishin meditation, and the book on Onosaburo Deguchi's art, of fairly sort of not mainstream literature, I guess, but it was very helpful in learning out about new religions, traditional arts. I hadn't been aware of the microbial organic farming method that Omoto used. So it's a very good introduction. And being hosted by a new religion, because I mean, show you what I thought I was going to like a Shinto worship, and it turned out to be a Shinto workshop, a Shinto sect workshop. And that sort of opened my eyes to the fact that Shinto and Buddhism are just not these monolithic entities, that they're really quite complex, and they've had complex interactions over time in Japan. I think that's very important to know and be aware of in trying to look at the sort of relationships that I'm interested in. So these are two of my books that talk about, one about Hanji Suijaku, which is a correspondence between kami and Buddhist heavenly figures, and then this occurred for around 1,000 years. So Shinto and Buddhism were closely intertwined over that period and shared rituals and practices, and the temples and shrines were often on the same site. This changed after 1868, when we at the start of the Meiji era and the opening of Japan, as it's called. That stage, Buddhism and Shinto were separated, and many Buddhist temples and pagodas and altar items were destroyed, and rituals, and then Shigendo was banned, and Shinto was established as a state religion. But also as part of that setting up, there were a number of shrine mergers in the period of 1906 to 12. This is another fairly non-mainstream book, but very informative about what happened over that period, with a loss of maybe up to 80,000 shrines. So the landscape we're seeing now is very different, not just because there's modern houses and the like, but the actual, I'll go to what's called a shrine now, and we'll sort of know that it's been a temple and shrine complex in the past. So it's just a different way of looking at things. And an example of that combinatory nature is this figure, Uho Doji. It's another, one of those moments I saw it and I'm thinking, that's unexpected. There's a figure with a gorinto, a 5-element stupa on their head, and it's a Buddhist manifestation of the sun goddess, Amaterasu Omikami. And the gorinto actually represents the great sun Buddha. So in a way that correspondence is to be expected. But when I first saw it, it was quite a surprise. That's enough of that. In 2015, I returned to Japan on a taiko tour. This was another leap of faith because I'd only been learning taiko for 4 months at the time, but the taiko drum in Hobart were generously invited me to join. This is how I met Shane, by the way. He is the husband of one of the taiko players, Edith, and they're both very good friends. And just the experience and the energy of that tour was incredible. There's a photo taken of us near Mybra after a concert. And the reason I put Feel the Energy as a subtitle to my blog and research is that the importance of vital energy or ki in sort of, I suppose, Asian culture generally, but Japanese culture is something I wanted to learn more about and thought that could be useful in terms of talking about our relationship with nature and each other. And I've just got a couple of quotes there from books written recently, and that's, you know, very interesting what people are saying recently. You know, the Japanese are my people who are attuned to the energy flow of any given moment, the key, and adapt their behaviour to accommodate people's needs. It's in the soul of Japan. And then the Japanese attitude to health is deeply influenced by the Chinese thinking of Yojo on nurturing health through lifestyle. It'd be interesting to see what people watching this think of those quotes, but they were both written by Japanese people, and Yojo is associated with the flow of energy with the body as well. So as you can see, on the far right in the book, Yojo Kun was written in the 1600s, I think, by Kyabra Ekikan, and that promotes a way of life based on nurturing health through lifestyle. (2016) was a monumental year. This is when I started spending half the year in Japan, and I moved into my apartment in Kyoto with the marvellous view of Nijo Castle. I participated in tea tours and art and architecture tours to the art islands, which was amazing. That's the year I joined Writers in Kyoto, as I said, and it's been a fabulous association. I met several Japanese people that year, and we have continued our relationships since then. The photo on the bottom left and right are taken 3 years later at the launch of the third week anthology that I co-edited. And I just wanted to include those because from the 2016 through to the 2019, my friendship with the people sitting around this table was really expanded my experiences and opportunities in Japan. If I want to use a pointer, but it might move the screen. So this is Keiji Fukushima. I met him and his wife Kaori and daughter Aoi at the time. He's a fabulous glass artist, and through Keiji I met Motoshige and Dokan Okamoto, who are Shigendo masters, and Seiji Inagaki at the front right, who was a Shigendo practitioner. And I met Akiko Murakami, who's a guide, takes spiritual guides around the Nara area. And we went to Mount Miwa, which is somewhere I really wanted to go, and Hasadera and Muraji and various places like that. And then I also met Yoshiaki and Michiko Yagi, and I met them through Writers in Kyoto, through the public Facebook site when I posted about the tea ceremony, and Yoshiaki got in touch through that. Through these friendships, I've had so many opportunities to visit places and be involved in Japanese traditions that just wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So I'm really grateful for that association. And on the right are the members of Writers in Kyoto, friends who also attended the launch, and likewise I've learned a lot and had many experiences through those relationships. Now this title might sound a bit sort of over the top, this changes everything, but seeing this image really did change my perception of the 5 Buddhist elements. and what they meant. This was in 2017. Up until that point, I'd thought of them as sort of static physical things like the Grinto grave markers or the reliquaries. That's what I think, representations of the universe, but in a static form. Then I saw this image of a body within a stupa, and then reading the description, it's a correlation of the elements with the chakras in the body, representing the two mandalas of Shingon Buddhism, the two sets of hands, and then the two small circles representing nirvana and the attainment of enlightenment. So I guess up until that point, I'd sort of meditation, Japan, Zen sort of thing. I hadn't sort of made that association with esoteric Buddhism, and it sort of makes a lot of sense because cultures around the world, the elements are part of us, and we are part of the world and the elements. But focusing on them as a meditation tool was, really sort of eye-opening. I guess, Ed, you would, you do that anyway. But for me, just that particular image that really sort of hit home. I first saw it in the book Symbolism of the Stupa by Adrian Snodgrass, then in The Art of Japanese Tantrism, and neither of them cited where it was from. It actually took me quite a while to discover it was drawn by Kakuban around 1141, and fortunately his treatise on the 5 elements, I guess, was translated in 2000 in this book, A Study into the Thought of Kogyo Daishi Kakuban. So I'm pleased to know where the origin of it. Kakuban was a Shingon monk and helped revitalize a religion at that time. And this was sort of part of the process. From that point, I became more interested in Shugendo, learning about Shugendo as sort of an ancient Japanese religion that involves mountain worship and aesthetic practice, and training through focusing on death and rebirth, or ritual death and rebirth. Through meeting Keiji and talking to Dokan and Motoshige Okamoto, I was asking them about, what the Godai meant to them. And they said, answered, we are Godai. And, just sort of, we are the elements. And I sort of haven't had that said to me before. It really sort of made an impression. The books I've got illustrated there are just a selection of the ones I have on Shugendo. The one on the far left was written in 1970. It was one of the first and very thorough, Byron Earhart. 2 on the right are more recent, and there's been a real surge in interest, academic interest in Shugendo. Many books written about it, conferences held, articles held. So there's a considerable amount of information now. A Path into the Mountains was just released about a month ago by an academic at Kyushu University, who I admire his work. Because of the syncretic nature of Shugendo, bringing together Buddhist and Shinto and Taoist rituals and practices, they combined both the Godai and Gogyo, 5 elements and the 5 phases in the practice. And being out in nature, praying to waterfalls, it's quite a remarkable experience. The picture on the top right was taken on my first pilgrimage to Mount Ontake in January 2018. I wrote a blog about that, which has the title there, Shugendo Now. And also in the recently released catalogue from the Spirit of Shizen exhibition, which is currently on in Luxembourg, focusing on 72 seasons of Japan. I wrote an essay on seasonal elements of pilgrimages at Mount Ontake. So I'd been there twice in winter and twice in summer, and the contrasts were quite marked. So it's something that's sort of quite dear to me. I've also had a lot of support from a gentleman called Riko Shora, who I met through my blog, and he publishes a lot of information on Shugendo in English. which is quite useful. When my talk was advertised, one of the books I had there was the one on the left, Irezumi, the pattern of dermatography in Japan. It's about tattooing. And I had read, so, I'll be reading an article, a book, and, see reference to something. And it's got a whole chapter on the dragon tattoos that firefighters in Edo used to wear or have tattooed on their skins. And dragons represent water, so they were seen as a way to protect them from fire. And Van Gulik writes as a wonderful description of the tattoos and the relationship between fire and water and metal, which were the hooks that were used to pull buildings down to stop the fire. And he also talks in detail about Inyo Gogu, or yin yang and the 5 phases. So it was an excellent publication, very hard to find, but well worth the search. And on the right is a book that I bought in Teramachi in Kyoto, about the work clothes, and that shows some of the coats firefighters would wear, and also talks about coats that that members of elite society would wear when they were mourning for people after fire. Also imagery of dragons and the like. So it's those sort of connections and details with the elements that I like to follow through. This, just check the time. Rush on. Oh. Very quickly, this were 2 articles on my digital library that, again, opened up new worlds. One's a publication from the 1650s, which talks about Aristotle's elements in European natural philosophy. It's translated by a Japanese doctor, and it gives some insights into the importance of yin yang and the 5 phases and the principle of energy at that time. And it was in a PhD scholarship. There hasn't been a lot of other work in English written about that point. The other one was about the response of Tokugawa Niemitsu to the Little Ice Age around the 1640s. And they, both of them, I think, are showing some of the external influences in Japan in the period where it was said to be closed. And there's many more examples where there's things like Dutch learning, of course, but there was quite a lot of trade going on between Japan and other countries, even if Japanese people couldn't leave the country. In my sort of library research, I also came across quite a lot of musings by environmental philosophers and things that I hadn't been expecting, but there's a lot of interest in the thoughts of Watsuji Tetsuro, who wrote a book called Fudo, or translated as Climate or Milieu in 1935. And also Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen Buddhism, and Kokai, the founder of Shingon Buddhism. Quite a lot of philosophers write about their thinking, particularly a Buddha being a Buddha in the very body, and the Buddha nature of what's around us, the mountains and the streams and the like. So there's been a number of papers written about, you'll see here, elemental discourse around Dogen's ideas of mountains, rivers and the great earth, and then ones about place. So there's a lot of rich material to work with in terms of the impact and the elements. It's been a great honour to actually be involved in this book that will be published in the next week or two. As I said, I met Yoshiaki Yagi in 2016, and he invited me to be the editor of his book on things Japanese, which I was pleased to do. I learned a lot about about things Japanese and his perspective, and how the synthetic Buddhism and Shinto was still practiced in current times, and he talks about various authors and the theatre and food and all aspects of Japanese culture. But I really enjoyed that process, and thank you for the opportunity. So I'll let people know when that's published. It's going to be through Amazon, so it'll be available soon. And then the next steps. Next steps. So to finish writing my book, I have been quite taken by the way How to Live Japanese is presented, so I'm likely to use that as a template. I really like having images, or in books, so they use a model where generally there is a sort of one page of text and one image, or maybe 1.5 pages of text and image, so for a number of different subjects. So I thought that could suit the way I want to share this information more. So there's still some things I would like to explore more, to include in the book, and one of them is the many types of nature found in Japan. So when I tell people that I'm working on nature and culture in Japan and what we can learn, people will say, that there's much written about the Japanese love of nature, and yet at the same time there are, concretization of the waterways and the seaways, and there's a lot of plastic use, and there has been a lot of water pollution in the past. There's the impact on their practices overseas, which applies to other countries as well, of course. But and then with the forest being 40% plantations, there are issues associated with that. So I sort of, it's something that I want to address, and I've come across many different references to nature in my reading. So wild, secondary, super nature, inner nature, digital nature, which is Team Lab talk about quite a bit. And so I want to consider their implications for sustainable practices. And then, as I was saying, the responses to natural and human-made disasters, I think we could learn from the countries too, and then continue my work on symbolism. But my biggest wish is to come back to Japan. It's been 2.8 years now, and there's many people. I think the first time I go back, I'll just be visiting people and visiting a few places. I particularly like to speak to Japanese scholars, people who read Japanese, about some of my ideas. I've got some people lined up, and yeah, that's my biggest wish in terms of a next step. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. I'll get out of share, stop. Share. There we go. Sorry, I haven't left much time, have I? Oh. Any questions?
Thanks.
Yes,
I was
does anyone
gonna
have
say-
any questions? I'm kind of trying to make my screen so that I can see everybody's face again. Gallery. Yeah. If anyone has any questions, could you please raise your hand or otherwise indicate that you'd like.
Well, it's a lot to take in. Sorry, I was trying to fit a lot in. Yes,
I have a question, Jan, if you have a moment.
Yeah.
It was just something that came up this morning in conversation with my wife. We were talking about the kyureki, the traditional Japanese calendar. We're having a kind of odd summer here in Japan this year. It seems to be kind of grab bag of, hot weather and rain and so on. And we were talking about, according to the kyureki, it's going to be an early summer and so on. What do you think of the kyureki? Because I've often found it quite helpful trying to predict Japanese seasons.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think the fine focus on the seasons that you have, especially the every 5 days, saying, this is associated with, particular plant blooming or the rain starting or something like that, does show a deep awareness of what's going on around you, something very much noticed. But also, I think a lot of that sort of material comes out of the Kyoto or Kansai region, and Japan being such a long archipelago, it doesn't always apply everywhere, I guess. But I think it is based on that close observation. There is, of course, changes in climate now to deal with. But if you're finding that it's sort of useful still now, then that shows that it's a robust system. And the change between the calendar system, that was previously used in Japan, and the modern Gregorian system is another big change. It happened, of course, in the 1870s. So the Japanese people have had to deal with a lot of changes in that sense. But the zodiac calendar and the days of the week, and all related to the elements, and so it's there, if not consciously there. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Jen. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Well, come on.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Jan. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. You had talked about when you get new books, you organize them by writing down the keywords and then keeping those so you can refer back to them later. I'm very interested to know more about how you categorize and where do you keep all of these keywords? Do you keep them in your computer? Do you have like a special, I don't know, how do you digitalize or store all of that information so you can refer back to the books easily at a later date?
Yes, well, first thing I do, most books have an index, so I'll go to the index and I look for Godai or Gogyo or Inyo or Yin Yang or 5 elements or anything sort of related to those themes. So that's a starting point, and that gives me a sense of, sometimes you might expect them to be in a book and they're not. And so that's what I'm finding, that even though they've sort of been pervasive, they're not always written about in histories of Japan. And then I'll go to that point in the book and put in the markers. And that's the way I sort of keep, and I'll take notes. Sometimes I'll just say in this particular book page, whatever. For the digital versions, then it's just a matter of putting it in the title. So, and then I can search on those words. So I have a set number of words that might be a person's name who I'm interested in. So I'll put his or hers name in the title so that I can search on that, or it might be a particular period in Japanese history, or that's how I do it. But I don't, what I should have done is each time I get a book is put it into a reference catalogue, like a digital one. So to do, it's possible to get someone to do that now, but I think that would be good to have as well. It'd be easy to search that too.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow, that sounds really daunting, Jen. All those books. I think most of us have a lot of hard copy books. And my own question is, maybe you're not thinking about this yet. I certainly am. What do you think is going to happen to them, later? What do you have a plan for sort of setting up a way to donate the books to somebody or anything like that? There's so many books around, and I myself have many, many books, and I'm just so worried that they're just going to go in the trash when I'm, gone. So do you have any plan for that?
Yeah, no, it is something that I have thought about quite a bit, especially when I order more books, which I have done. Yeah, I guess this is something you probably talked about at some of the other WIC events. Did you? There was some talk about I don't know, WIC library, but they being in Tasmania makes it more complicated. I know some individuals who are interested in individual subjects, like a friend who's very interested in the architect side. So, you know, possibly leave those to him. But no, and some of them are quite important, rare books, which would be a shame to go to the op shop or something. Although, you know, maybe that's what might happen. But no, we're certainly thinking about, you know, how we can give them a future life. But it is more complicated being in Tasmania than being in Japan. I think where they could find more people to, you know, say, I've got these books available, you know, would you like some of them?
To send them. Wow, yes, I understand. Yeah, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Jann?
I have one simple question, Jann.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you.
We finally got our picture sorted. My question is, it's just a very simple question. I can understand now your interest in Taiko when we first started Taiko and everything. But initially, what was the initial spark for you to know everything Japanese?
It was actually, it was the animism, the practice of animism in Japan.
All right.
So, you know, I was thinking this is an industrialized country where people still see spirits in everything, in nature. So, you know, henceforth, is there something that we can learn from that? So, but, you know, I had, so that was why I went to the Shinto workshop. I guess I was influenced by anime studio, Ghibli anime as well, just that sort of soft, beautiful relationship. So, but no, it was the, and then
that was sort of the catalyst.
And I think maybe that trip to 1996 trip to Japan, where I heard Taiko at the conference dinner, maybe that sparked thing, because as you know, I moved to Hobart to learn Taiko, and it was just in my being, and you know, Taiko is an elemental activity as well, and so that really attracted me, and the physical nature of it. So, but yeah, that was the initial spark, and then I think sort of building on my interest in following through themes, and that just not necessarily being prepared to believe what I read, sort of comparing what people different write, and you know, like the fact that people are saying that the pentagram was around 1,000 years ago as a symbol of the 5 phases, and there's sort of no evidence of that.
Yeah, so everything just progressed as you went. Yeah.
So,
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks for the question. Lovely to see you both.
Nice to see you.
Can I ask a question?
Hi, Nicholas.
Hi, Jann, thank you very much. That was a very nice talk, and I got a lot out of it. And obviously, today's talk was very narrowly focused, and I know you have a broad range of interests, and I'm curious to know how you have arranged your books physically to incorporate all your different interests and how they interrelate to each other.
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose I've had themes in my mind. So I have books about Shingon Buddhism altogether, books about kimono, books about gardening, books about the tea ceremony. Sometimes there'll be overlaps, quite a lot of books on woodblock prints that I've sort of got a structure in my mind, I guess, and then I just have them in the sections. The digital ones can't be, or maybe there are folders, I've never looked at that, but as I said, you can use keywords to order them in a sense. But yeah, that's how I do it, and I just like, sometimes they get a bit misplaced. I haven't still been able to find In Praise of Shadows. I know it's there because I wanted to put it in my presentation, but it's only reading there. Yeah, but I like looking at the books. That sort of gives me pleasure, and how they're yeah, sort of kept together. But yeah, that's how the way I approach it anyway. So those pictures that I showed were mainly taking books out of sections of the bookshelf, but sometimes bringing them in from others, if like the art books often tend to be very large, so they can't always be stacked together. So if that's the case, I'll just have to try and remember where they are.
Thank you very much. I think that Stephen had one. Yes.
Yeah, just one question. Thank you for that talk. I think your organizational skills put me to shame. I've got a library of books here, but it's there's no filing system whatsoever. It's completely random. I was wondering about the sort of significance of your book collection and particular book choices. If individual books had a kind of emotional milestones or nostalgic milestones for you. I certainly remember flying into Japan for the first time on a cheap Aeroflot flight, reading, I think it was reading Pictures from the Water Trade, which I've read since. Wonderful book. And this book here, this one, Shirley Hazard's wonderful book, The Great Fire novel, has a strong reminder for me of Kure, my time in Kure. I wondered if you had that sort of similar, these kind of books represent milestones in your life.
Just first a comment. It's interesting that you mentioned the Pictures from the Water Trade, because that's one of the books that John Dougill said sort of influenced him a lot when he sort of first went to Japan. So I've got a copy of that, because that's one thing I sort of follow up people's recommendations if they think they're insightful or good. Certainly there are certain books that stand out, I think, in terms of if I read and think, oh, you know, that's something I hadn't thought of before, or it's new and exciting, and just trying to think now. I put the ones behind me that were there's one called Gorenji Journey, which is the story of a Japanese historian in Australia, and I thought that was it was really interesting to see how someone from Japan looked at Indigenous Australian cultures, because there's similarities but quite a lot of difference between them, and another part of that library is Aboriginal art and culture, probably as extensive as Japan. So that was an important book in terms of joining those two systems. I really did like, I'm not just saying this because Rebecca is the host, but her book At Home in Japan, I found that very insightful. You know, just something I hadn't thought about a foreign woman living in a village in Japan. And I hadn't met Rebecca when I read it, and then did meet her in we were lining up to get an autograph from Alex Kerr when he launched another curator. I was standing next to each other, and that's how we met. That was very good book. I did the one about Kakuban, funnily enough. It's very academic and sort of esoteric, I guess you'd say, but that really, sort of gave me information that was very important to my studies. I don't know, I did sort of think of ones that if people ask for recommendations, I don't know if they're sort of milestones, but they are ones that I have enjoyed and thought people would get something from. There's the book by you can see this book. This has got a lot of little markers in it.
Oh, yeah.
It's a young adult novel.
I read it.
Black and the Ninja Wind by Lisa Lowitz, who we know, and her husband Shogo Okitani. And I didn't actually read that for quite a while, but you know, I didn't know what it was. But when I did, sort of the bringing in Japanese culture into a young adult story was really well done. I sort of recommend that book. So yeah, so I'm not answering your questions in terms of milestones, but yeah, I mean, every book has a story, and some have been more influential than others, I guess. But yeah, I really enjoy having that sort of large collection. Thanks for the question. I'll give it some more thought.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to comment or question?
Yeah, I've got a question. Have you read all the book?
I have skimmed, I haven't read them word for word, but I have looked through them all, because otherwise they're sort of, oh, I guess you can read them later, but I like to know, you know, when I've ordered something or when it comes, you know, how useful that might be. Like I got a book the other day on women in the No theatre, and or female representation. And when I looked through there was a picture of a Garinto, which is in one of the No plays. So that's sort of something that, you know, I just sort of picked up on by, that's what pictures are good, but looking through. So, you know, I'm always looking for examples of how the sort of elements are represented in different cultural settings. So that was good. So yeah, I have looked at them. I haven't read them all word for word.
Thanks. Thank you.
One quick question. Do you use, you said you keyword your books, your subjects of your books, which as a photographer, Stephen, I'm sure knows, but it's very important to put the keyword on all your photographs so you can find them when you're looking for them later. And of course, if it's digital photos or even scan photos, the photo software has a place to do all that. So how do you do it on the computer? Do you have they call it data assets management, is DAM, I think is what they call it. But I mean, if you see that, I wonder if there's such a software for books or for articles, especially. I don't do research, so for me it wouldn't be that important, but for someone like you and some of the others who do a lot of research and you know, write academic articles, whatever, I would think such a software would be helpful. Is there such a thing? Do you use such a thing, or you just do it in paper by hand, or type the keywords and make your own in a Word document?
Yeah, it's well, with the digital copies, it's easy because I just use Books, which is an Apple app, and yeah, it's just a matter of using search words, and if it's really good, I just put excellent at the end. So plus the other words that will sort of identify the subject matter. I with the paper books, I don't have a digital system, which if I had have started from the start, it would have been good to have had one. It would make them easier to search, and it's still a possibility, but it would be a big job to do. But yeah, I'm not aware of any software at the moment. I have to look into it.
It would be a lot of work, but you could actually take a picture of each book, of the cover of the book, and then, you know, put that into some software that could allow you to add keywords to the photograph. So yes. It would be a lot of work. I wouldn't, not for 1,000, you know, I wouldn't want to do it, but for one particular theme or project, it might be worth a way to catalog your books. I'm sure libraries have a way that they do that, but it's not my forte, so I have no idea how it's done. Anyway, great talk. I had another question, but I'm going to email about that later because it's not about books. I'll send you a message later. I think we don't have enough time for what I would ask now. Something sparked an idea, so I contact you later.
Great, look forward to it.
Okay, thanks everybody. And Jen, do you have any last words? It's a terrible thing to say. You have any, final thing that you'd like to say?
Just check my notes. Yeah, I don't think so. I'd be very happy to hear from anyone if they have further questions or the like. It was a lot to cover and take in. So if you sort of pause and give some thought, it'd be great to hear from you. And just like to thank everyone again for tuning in and sort of sharing my stories about the library and how I've got to this point. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yay.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you very much.
It's I'm thinking about, first the introduction and then at the end we have the vote of thanks. So I guess this is a vote of thanks. Thank you for your incredibly well organized talk. I want to say in Japanese, Sasuga Hakase. It's no wonder you're a PhD, because you have these incredible ways of organizing and looking at things, which is something that all of us are very envious of, I'm sure. And we've also seen a different side of you, at least I have today, this incredibly academic and very able to discriminate between subject matters and extremely, it's a slightly different take to what I knew you about before. And I think all of us would like to say that we wish and hope that you can come back to Japan very soon and resume your studies here and resume your contacts with everybody. Thanks very much for joining, and thank you to Lisa for recording. And I think that a lot of people will want to tap into this recording later on, people who missed it. So thank you very much again. And thanks everybody for joining.
All right. Well, let's all say goodbye then. Everyone take care in the heat and, staying well and all of those things. Until
Okay.
next
Thank you
time.
very much.
Thank you,
Right.
Jan.
Enjoy the elements, folks.
Rebecca.
Thank you, Jan.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.